Okay, so now we're ready to start talking about the while loop. And you know what, before we dive into the loop, I want to kind of run through what I would call the essentials of counter-controlled repetition, which is what we're still doing here. First, we need a loop counter variable, and we saw this with the for loop as well, that we have the loop counter variable, the value of which controls the loop, whether or not the loop is going to keep going or whether or not it's time to stop. And then also we have a loop condition, and this is a relational expression, basically, using your relational operators, greater than, less than, and so on. And relational expressions evaluate to true or false. We saw this in the decision, the unit on if-else decision making. And then what we also need is an increment here, which we'll talk about. That's incrementing the loop counter by 1. So we are going to write a while loop to fill the screens with yellow smiley faces. And just like before, we will set the color to yellow. We'll isolate the smiley face in a variable called smile. Okay, so the while loop is different from the for loop. And, you know, I like the for loop because it's so easy for beginners. You don't have to put a lot of thought into it. And that's not the case with the while loop. You have to take more responsibility in your coding for the while loop. That's the way I look at it. So you have to be careful when you're coding a while loop. So the first thing you do is you create a loop counter. I haven't even thought about the loop yet. I have to get the counter in place. Whereas with the for loop, the counter is part of the basic structure. But with the while loop, you create your counter. I'm going to call it counter this time. I'm going to set it to 1. And then, so that's the essential number 1, the loop counter. Okay. And then here's my loop. While counter is less than or equal to 5,000, because we were told fill the screen with 5,000 yellow smiley faces, I should say. So while counter is less than 5,000, so this is essential number 2, the loop condition. And this evaluates to true or false. So think about it. Counter is 1. Is 1 less than or equal to 5,000? Yes, that's true. So the body of the loop executes. Okay, we would call this, here's some more terminology I'm going to throw at you. This is the loop header. And the for loop has a loop header as well. It's like the top of the loop. And then this part, the body, the inside of the sandwich is the loop body. Okay, so when the relational expression or the loop condition evaluates to true, the body executes. Okay, if it ends up being false, and eventually it will be, then it's skipped and it moves on to whatever comes next in the code. So the loop just keeps running and running while it still gets a true, and then eventually it reaches false. That becomes false, and then the loop is going to finally stop. So that was essential number 2. Essential number 3 is the increment. In order for this to work properly, the loop counter has got to keep going up by 1 with every iteration of the loop. So I do that by saying counter equals whatever is already in there, but add 1 to it. So that's what gets it going from 1 to 2 to 3 and so on. So let's go ahead and run that. We'll make sure we get our smiley faces. Okay. I want to show you something. Now I told you the for loop is really difficult to mess up. The while loop is easy to mess up, okay? And one easy thing to do is to forget that third essential, which is the loop counter, or not the loop counter, the increment. So watch what happens when I run this without the increment. You probably know what's going to happen. Look at this. It just keeps going and going and going. That's an infinite loop. I haven't provided a way out for the loop. Now think about this. If I'm saying counter is equal to 1, keep going while 1 is less than 5,000. And then I don't change the counter at all. It's just going to keep going and going and going. 1 is always going to be less than 5,000 till the end of time, and so the loop is going to run until the end of time. So don't forget the increment. That's really what I want to drive home here is the increment. I mean, if you're going to forget anything, it's going to be that when you're coding a while loop. So maybe we'll do one more. Why don't we write a while loop to do the alternating pink and red hearts like we did before, just for some reinforcement here. Okay, so let's see here. I will get the heart in place. Okay. ASCII code number 3. And then, okay, so let's start thinking about this here. How about I'll use C for my loop counter. C equals 1. Okay, haven't even thought about the while loop yet, but I have to get that counter in place. Let's say while C is less than or equal to, let's go 2500 because we're printing 2 hearts at a time. That'll give us 5,000 characters total. Ending my sandwich so I don't forget later, okay? And now the body of the loop is just going to be the printing of the hearts, okay? And I can't forget that increment. Okay, if I ran it right this minute, it would just be tons and tons of never-ending hearts. But I need to increment that. So C equals whatever's already in there plus 1. Okay, I just want to comment this. This is my loop counter. Okay, let's run that. See if we can see first the smileys, then the hearts. Everything ended. Everything's good.